Namaskar and welcome to this exciting show, Sattology, Debunking Mythology. And I have an amazing guest and a great friend. I love his talks. He comes on many Indian channels, very regular strategic expert. And we are going to drill down on strategic aspects today, just for educational purposes. Our purpose is debunking mythology or debunking fakeness. So a lot of fakeness out in the media today, and people are putting out their viewpoints. So we're going to a little bit eat on his brain and see what he thinks that is important from our knowledge perspective. So many of us are confused about China, and somehow China doesn't make sense what they do. What they're saying appears very emotional, devoid of any facts. So what does China think? China, I'm saying CCP, Chinese Communist Party. And in the end, I will say, in fact, the dharma was brought into China from India. And so India is the dharmic, you can say, original, but now it is totally gone. So without delay, let us welcome Shri Abhujit Iyer Mitra.
Har
Welcome,
Mahadev. Thank you for
Har Mahadev. Abhijit, people love the way candor you bring onto the stage. Like people love it when you speak your mind, and you love it. So I think that's the biggest USP.
Thank you. That's why most people in India hate me, because we've become a country of, just loving fakery and hypocrisy and two-facedness. So I'm glad somebody loves me, because most people in India just hate my guts.
No, it's not. Truth is always truth. Now coming back
Mm.
to this China, and I'm talking about CCP. Beginning from how do they think? That's a is a very intriguing question.
So, there's many different aspects to how they think. But in terms of military, one of the things that we've always tried to see is, we're constantly seeking justification. Why did they invade in us, India, in 1962? Why did they try to attack us again in 1967? Why did they try something not so nice in 1980 and then 1982, and then I think again in 86? Why did they come and squat on territory in 2017 at the same time their president was visiting India? And it generally, what India, and I think the rest of the world doesn't have to deal with it, but India has to deal with it, is battered wife syndrome. When a wife keeps getting bashed up by her nasty husband, she's like, what did I do wrong? You're constantly trying to see where you went wrong. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with you. The problem in this case lies entirely with China. And there is a reason for this. You see, and this is something we're only now beginning to realize, because the entire canon of communist thought that China operates out of was written in early communism in the 1920s, 1930s, and even right up to the 1960s, when, colonial paradigms of colonialism is a product not of capitalism, but of mercantilism. And I hope the viewers understand that difference. Because what happens is that when you are a mercantile power, you want to control the raw materials, which is why most colonial states attack the countries that supply them with raw materials and enslave the population. Because then you don't want to give them that profit margin, and you are more than willing to pay the cost of an occupation as long as the profits are greater. As in the cost of extraction goes down and there's no profits given to the nation from which you are extracting. So this is why, Rome invaded Gaul, why Rome annexed Egypt, why Greece needed to go around conquering territories around it, Alexander and so on and so forth. And that has generally been the historical pattern. Now, it got exacerbated during the age of exploration, with ships and with, a whole set of complex phenomenon that led to exploration and so on and so forth. And it got exacerbated by the Industrial Revolution in Europe, because by that time, essentially just say 100 Europeans with early Gatling guns could mow down a traditional army of hundreds of thousands with no thought at all. And I think the British were the first to realize this, because India stopped paying its bills in 1914. 1914 was the first year where the cost of occupying India was greater than the uh, depreciated cost of goods coming out of India. So it was no longer profitable to occupy India. It was the colonial hangover because, once a status quo has been built, there are interest groups and things like that that have an interest in it. Sometimes it's just pig-headedness. So Winston Churchill, for example, was just plain pig-headed about it. That took them another 30 years to get out of India. Now, this is the same mentality that China has today. Okay, it is its thoughts, its writing. On one hand, it is resurgent and powerful. On the other, its thoughts and writings are still stuck in that same age. Now, you remember when the Soviet Union, when it first got created, after it sorted out the internal civil war between the whites, the Bolsheviks, the Mensheviks, and the white army, the Tsarist army, and all of that, the first thing they did was reconquer all the things. They tried to restart wars with Poland, with Finland, and all of that for reconquest and so on and so forth. So this is the same phase that they're going through. And it is particularly important to look at manufacturing and the importance of manufacturing within the Chinese economy. Even today, if you look at construction plus hard manufacturing, construction, I count it as manufacturing. It accounts for something like 60 to 70% of their economy. The services have become bigger now. They're slowly getting bigger, but as China keeps getting trapped into that middle income trap, services do not see. Services expand when you transition into the information age. That transition requires the state to take a back seat. We know the Chinese Communist Party is refusing to take a back seat. And when it doesn't take the back seat, that empowerment of the people, manufacturing, because it's a socially disruptive process, requires a strong state. Post-manufacturing requires the state to take a back seat, which the CCP is not willing to do anymore. Well, it was never willing to do. So what you're seeing is a prolongation of this mercantilist colonization mindset in the Chinese, driven by natural economic impulses. So this is one major thing you have to look at, is the nature of the Chinese economy, the nature of thought from which they inherited their thought processes of how they need to deal with their neighborhood, which era of communism it came from, basically the early Soviet Union and so on and so forth. In terms of political dogma, economically they've shifted along, but not much, mind you. Because remember, even now, public or government demand accounts, because they need to keep the population under check. They need to, Tiananmen Square taught them that having an independent middle class is very dangerous. So it shifted again from private demand to public demand, which then the government then sells outwards and things like that. So it's the nature of their economy that still supports a colonial mindset in that sense. The second is historically, when you look at it, and there's a beautiful book by Alistair Ian Johnston called The Strategic Culture of China. I'd really urge all of you to read it. He shows a pattern how over the last 2,500 years, every time China is weak, they pretend they're being compassionate and benign. The moment they get strong, they wage war on every front that they have around them. Okay, it has always been the pattern. It has never changed. It doesn't matter which dynasty. It doesn't matter if it was a foreign dynasty. It doesn't matter if it was the native Han and the Tang dynasty. It doesn't matter if it was the foreign Yuan, the Mongol Yuan and the Manchurian Qing dynasty, or the current CCP dynasty. It never changes. It's the same pattern throughout. So I think these are the two main things you need to look at.
Oh, great points and great opening actually for this understanding the Chinese mindset. Now another thing is it's coming to the mind that whenever what they have done is the negotiation for them is from their perspective. So they're not negotiating with you actually. They're never negotiating with you. Their perspective is what they're trying to achieve. So they're not willing to give up. They just want to see what they are trying to get. And if you agree to that, that is a success of their negotiation. So it's never a two-party framework in negotiation with China.
Look, for them, negotiation is a smoke screen. It's a placeholder till they get 100% of what they want. So basically, it's like this. Their idea of a fair negotiation is assume I lay claim to 100% of America. And then I say, you know what, let's be fair. I'm a great country. I'm a magnanimous country. I will leave you with California, Oregon, and Washington, and you give me the rest of America, the East Coast, all the way up to Nevada and all those places. You just keep the West Coast, the 3 states on the West Coast, and see, I'm such a kind par. I'm only taking 75 to 80% of my claims, and I'm actually giving you 35% of what belongs to me. And they've done this with every single country around them. They've done this with the USSR and then Russia. They did this, though there is a case to be made there that, it was Chinese land which was seized by the Treaty of Nerchinsk in 1757 or 18, I don't know, but whatever. But, if you're trying to fix every historical treaty from 150, 200 years back, based on maps that follow no modern cartographic convention, I mean, seriously, like, you look at the maps on which the South China Seas are based. These are pre-cartographic rough drawings. They are inadmissible as evidence anywhere in the world, in any court of law, including in Chinese courts of law internally, but this is the basis of their claim. Okay, they find one historical analogy. It's like, in the Indian freedom movement, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, because there's a line in the Vedas somewhere that says the sun shone for 6 months and then it didn't shine for 6 months. And he interpreted this to be that, this was somewhere in the Arctic Circle. So he wrote this book called The Arctic Origins of the Hindus. It's like me today going and invading Russia, saying that, the Arctic is entirely mine. They will actually base their claims on bullshit like this, and what is worrying is it's actually taken seriously and they get away with it because they're willing to sacrifice lives when they're weak, like they were under Mao Zedong, or they're willing to use their economic might to enforce these claims right now. Like, I'm exaggerating a bit. But, I hope the hyperbole conveys the message of what they tried to do.
Absolutely true. I mean, their claims against all the South China Sea countries are exactly like that. Because the ocean touches your land, and the ocean is Chinese, so the coast belongs to me. Pretty much they're saying that.
Pretty much.
And if somebody tries to defend, they get offended. If somebody tries to defend, they get angry at it. And they say, why you're defending? Why? And so if you ask somebody logically,
what is amazing in all of this is the fact that people, because every country, almost every government, almost every think tank has financial links to China. They actually grace this with respect. They will actually create hundreds and thousands of pages of pseudo-intellectual bullcrap, intellectually justifying these claims. They will try to, set up conferences worth hundreds of millions of, hundreds of thousands of dollars, just to have a pseudo intellectual masturbation session, pretending to, see deep, profound insights into Chinese geopolitics. Or if you're an Indian strategist, you see this faux, because there are only 100 people in India who speak Mandarin, as in trained Mandarin speakers in India at the moment, apparently, academic level. We like to see this profundity that doesn't exist. It's almost like the emperor's new clothes. We're a bunch of idiots who don't want to say the emperor is naked, so we say, that material is so beautiful. I mean, all you can see is the emperor naked and his penis dangling, but you can't say that. So you say, such amazing muslin. I only saw this when I went to Limoges in France, where, it was woven by virgins on a moonlit night with these silk taken from the arachna, something spider, and blah, 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 and la-di-da-di-da. Just because it is done under an academic veneer, please do not get carried away and call it out for the shit that it is, the unmitigated, unadulterated, cow dung that it is. Cow dung has more value because cow dung can be used for fuel. This can't even be used for fuel.
No, actually, the right word to use is the mental the mental status of these policymakers. You know, like common sense is completely thrown out of the window when you talk to. Like I have an example. I used to go to
So,
Shanghai a lot.
having worked in think tanks, I can tell you what the mindset behind this is. On one hand, you'll see, for example, say George Soros, who wants to, fix liberalism everywhere in the world, except in China. Notice he never talks about China. Why do you think that is? Or when he talks about China, it's extremely red, it's extremely muted, it's extremely mild. Why do you think that is? Why don't think tanks thrive on access? They peddle access as policy influence. It isn't, but they need that access, so they, under the guise of keeping communications lines open, they will peddle a certain line. Being an Indian, I can tell you this is the same tactic Pakistanis use with strategic think tanks in DC, where just to get access to their nuclear program or their generals or something like that, you have to take certain pro-Pakistani stances, otherwise you're completely cut out. Now, this is what the Chinese do, and the thing is, they've actually got a very, very good calling card, which is their economy. I've had so many discussions with people off the record from the American nuclear security part of the government, the French nuclear guys, and all of that. And they're like, in private, they're all willing to admit that, China is proliferating, and they're proliferating ridiculously in terms of fissile material and weaponizable fissile material technology, weapons technology, and all of that. But none of them want to call it out. They don't have government permission to call it out because they have too much trade dependent on China. So they'll never call it out. Tell me what other country in this day and age. Serbia got bombed for a lot less in Kosovo or in Bosnia. For a modern day country to put 1 million people based on ethnic considerations or religious considerations into concentration camps and get away with it, not even have a whimper of an economic boycott against it. That's the kind of chutzpah you can have when you're China and that kind of economy and that kind of trade. I think what has happened with the reaction to the concentration camps in Xinjiang has emboldened the Chinese that they can do whatever they want, and as long as they incentivize industry in the rest of the world. And this is the dangerous part when it comes to American elections. This is why I never like industrialists or companies interfering in elections, just as I don't like governments interfering in business. And because when industry or businesses start interfering in elections, it fundamentally violates the one person, one vote principle. Because money amplifies a message that is a fundamental violation of democracy. Now, I know in America it is held sacrosanct, but it is fundamentally wrong. And I think America is going to start paying the price for this. It's already paying the price for it. It's going to pay the price for it even more.
Absolutely true. I mean, you are absolutely right over there in assessment, because now the most of the candidates in the American elections focus on fundraising because they know that the money amplifies the vote or the message, and it can be a propaganda too, and which is again used by the opponents of American democracy in a big way. Now, coming back to China, in China, one of the biggest, uh, I would say, the biggest accusation for them has been their international loans. Now, loans have been used for diplomacy extensively by China. Like they try to buy off countries like Pakistan and many countries in Africa, and some countries in Asia also buy off, including India and UK and even US, buying Chinese equipment, which are Huawei-based telecom equipments for 5G. Now, people, India took a lead by banning their apps, but the other countries cannot do what India has done. They are in that debt spiral, and not only they have done that, but they have also put their own troops in those countries. to defend their own equipments and their own loan servicing things. So do you think that this has been an ethical practice, or there was a weakness on the part of CCP to devise this strategy of economic colonial occupation?
Right. So, see, there's several different aspects to it. India banning Chinese apps had, for me, pleasantly surprising detrimental effect on their app manufacturers. But I don't think anybody's looking at the damage to the Indian economy. When you ban TikTok, I have been speaking against TikTok for the last 2-3 years because, influencers and things like that who get paid money by TikTok, they have their banking details on there, direct bank linkages on there, through which China could have got into an entire banking system. All right. They could have compromised it because sensitive details were on there. They could have used your phone for any kind of checking up passwords and then use that as a backdoor to get into other things. And here's the thing. In India, we knew all the dangers of TikTok. There's lots written about it. You can Google it. And in spite of that, we only banned the app when our soldiers were killed in the border. Now, the problem with that is you are fine with your security being compromised, with your financial systems being compromised, with your banking infrastructure being compromised, as long as China isn't willing to shoot your troops. Then, when we ban certain apps, we think we're doing something bad to China, that's fine. But look at the consequences for India. It just adds to this whole thing of regulatory unpredictability. And app manufacturers from across the world, software investors are like, is India even a good country to invest in? Because if they're going to start banning apps just at a whim like this, there was not even a particular reason for banning certain apps. They banned a video player, a free open source video player that had absolutely no backdoors just because it was Chinese. On the same level as, say, something like TikTok, which was intrusive and compromised your systems. So there is that fundamental issue out there that when countries do push back, they do it in a clumsy way that will hurt them more, that will hurt us more over the long term than it will the Chinese over the short term, even though it hurts the Chinese in the short term. Second is the same phenomenon you see about China giving these loans. And these loans are designed to bankrupt the countries because not one of these loans being given has a break even, has prospects for break even, leave alone profit. So they're all going to default of those loans. I hope they all default on their loans because for me it's good because you can no longer invade a country. Unfortunately, the message that is going down to China, I don't think anybody will allow China to invade and occupy a country anymore. But the message that has gone because of the reaction to the Uyghur concentration camps is, the normal rules don't apply to China. America might have stopped Iraq from invading Kuwait, or Serbia from, Bosnian Serbs from occupying all of Bosnia, or Serbia from crushing Kosovo. But that won't apply to China. And that is the message that has been going out to the Chinese. So they might actually feel emboldened that when a country defaults on its loan, they will actually go invade and annex it. All right. They've already taken away sovereignty of the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka from the Sri Lankans. They practically own Gwadar in Pakistan at the moment. Finally, I think it was Tanzania or Mozambique, I forget who,
Tanzania.
that gave the Tanzania, that gave the Chinese the middle finger and said, what, keep your stupid loans to yourself. We'd rather die than take these idiotic loans from you because it doesn't make any economic sense. But tell me how many people are going to have that kind of spine? You look at the Indian government today, after all that has happened, given that we know how compromised Chinese software is, their hardware is even worse. The minister in telecoms, he has said that there is no ban on ZTE or Huawei, two Chinese companies, from getting the contract for Indian 5G installation. And this is supposedly a Hindu nationalist government, strong on security credentials, that is so blasé about this whole thing. it's just mind-boggling that to think the level to which they would have compromised even the Indian government. Either it's stupidity or it's bribery. I don't know which.
Given that the coronavirus thing, originated from China, which is very well known, Wuhan, and there is a dissenter who has claimed in UK that it was a bio weapon. But the world is surprised that there is not even a iota of recognition also by the Chinese. Or is it like a deliberate ignorance, or it is a strategy? People are confused now more and more.
So, as a rule, I never take dissenters seriously. I don't. It doesn't matter where they come from, and I realized this. I realized this long back because I used to see a lot of these Russian dissenters come out of Russia and say things, and I keep going back to Russia at least once every year, sometimes 2 years, when I can't afford it because Russia has become an incredibly expensive place. Well, now it's become cheaper, but in those days it was. Because I spent a lot of my childhood in the USSR. And what I saw was that dissenters, as a rule, for them to justify the value of their defection and the need to create a new life and make money, they will always exaggerate and allow themselves to be used as a propaganda tool. So please, I beg you, it doesn't matter on which side you are, never ever take a dissenter, defectors seriously. By their fundamental nature, they've betrayed their country, right? So not worth taking seriously. I saw this personally when I went to North Korea because there was a considerable difference between what was being said and what we were actually seeing on the ground. Because, despite all the attempts, the North Koreans didn't even attempt to hide certain segments. We were allowed to go into slums. So at times I was allowed to wander out on my own and just talk to people without a chaperone and things like that. And if you recollect, sometime during the North Korean famine, the Indian ambassador was allowed to do that. They have a certain trust with Indians that allows us to go around unchaperoned around North Korea in that sense. So, I saw that and I compared this because prior to that, I'd been to South Korea quite often. And somehow the narratives of these defectors in South Korea also never matched up. It just confirmed this whole thing, aversion that I have to defectors. I have an issue with the bioweapons theory because a bioweapon fundamentally, you need to have the tools of controlling it yourself. You never weaponize something till other people don't have a counter to it, but you have the antidote to it. In this case, the Chinese didn't. You've seen two separate waves of COVID, initially in Wuhan and then in the East Coast. So I'm not completely convinced about the bioweapon theory as at all.
The collateral damage which China has already done with Uyghur, and so people can mistrust them that they might not care about their own people dying. Do you think that can be the case with China?
Oh, yeah. Look, China didn't give a damn about their own people dying. Now they have to give a damn because, see, a whole generation of people has been accustomed to wealth. Unlike the Cultural Revolution and Mao's purges and things like that, which wiped out a total of about 70 million people, the Chinese Communist Party violently killed more of its own citizens, 7 times the number of its own citizens than the Japanese Imperial Army did. Let's never forget that. So the Chinese, like the Germans, were the first victims of Nazism. The Chinese are the first and most tragic and biggest victims of the Chinese Communist Party. Never forget that. And with the Chinese, you need to understand that they had the propensity to kill off large sections of their population in human wave attacks or whatever at one point of time. Today, I don't think they can get away with it without serious social consequences within China. Because you've had a whole generation accustomed to wealth, of not doing hard work, of doing, even factory work compared to dying on the field, dying in a battlefield is a cushy job because you get paid good money, you can live a good lifestyle and things like that. So I don't think they have that luxury anymore.
Now, coming back to the military, when the Indian armed forces and Chinese are in front to front, and we again see the uh, same mindset where they have set up a green line in their mind, and they're trying to attain their green line. And while we are stuck with McMahon line, which they don't even recognize. Now, India has already given back on McMahon line when they did not accept Burma's merger with India in many ways. Like I was reading that how Burma wanted to join India in 1948, and the British said McMahon line divides it. So McMahon line is accepted by some other countries. Chinese have not accepted it. So what is the Indian line which India is defending?
We depend on the line of delusion. It's vaguely based on the McMahon line, but remember, China accepted the McMahon line in its entirety with Burma. They never accepted the McMahon line with India. And mostly it had to do with our own diplomatic clumsiness in that sense. So today we have a line, an approximate line. It's called the line of actual control because it's always been subject to flux, which is why actual control. Whoever has infrastructure claims that part of land. It wasn't finalized in the 1962 war in any sense. And this has been the biggest problem, that we refuse to delineate that line to our own public, because we've shown the line to the Chinese. The Chinese in conversations know exactly where the line lies, but the Indian public does not know where the line lies. We have a fairly good approximation based on where the Chinese are building things. But then again, see, I can show you how the line of approximate control, it's not the line of actual control, I call it the line of approximate control because that's exactly what it is. Shifted from, say, in Pangong, which has been a subject of the current tension, shifted from about 8 kilometers east in 1998 to 8 kilometers west after 1998 to a point called Finger Four or Foxhole Point, which for all effects and purposes has been the line of actual control since 1998. So, there's a lot of, it's typical of a third world country. People think third world countries are about poor people, slums, hunger, misery, poverty. It's more than that. It's about third-rate people, third-ratedness, mediocrity infecting every levels of society. And you see that in the poor quality of decision-making and governments. Especially in a country that then follows a socialist pattern. In a feudal country, at least you have, of course, if you're born a dunce, no amount of education, you can be a nobleman, but then a moron nobleman and no amount of education can fix your brain. But generally, in a feudal country, elites may be able to do a good job. They can also do a horribly bad job, but they can possibly do a good job. That is how Britain developed. That is how France developed. In India, we've had a sort of, our socialism has sort of, it's not raised intelligence, it's spread the stupidity. It's like communism never spreads the wealth. Communism spreads the misery. It's Indian socialism spreads the stupidity. It incentivizes stupidity. And like that old saying, the shit always floats to the top. If you take a poop, you'll see the shit always floats to the top. That's what happens in India. That's what you see happening in India all the time. Your bureaucracy, all your other arms of government, it's literally, it's a poop fest. Fiesta de pupa.
So, no, great point.
Oh, sorry, that would be fiesta de merda. Yeah. See.
So coming back to the discussion, I can't stop laughing on this one. Now, Abhijit, the point especially if the armed forces are concerned, Indian armed forces have done fairly well despite all odds. I would say that despite all odds, they've done phenomenally well. And given the freedom they have been given to operate, I think, is this the first time India has taken such action against China, or it was 1962 also?
Look, we've done well in an extremely limited skirmish there is a serious danger in extrapolating individual acts of heroism and bravery to the ability of an army as a whole to perform well in a full-fledged war under extreme stress. And sometimes I worry because when you look at the economic disparity, this was, of course, the same reason that the North won the Civil War in America. An agricultural South was never going to win a war against an industrial North, despite having, elan and, great generals and great spirit and, whatever. They were never going to win that war. Ultimately, the industrial might of the North was always going to win. Ultimately, it didn't matter how great German scientists were. Every wing form flying today, from the B-2 stealth, the flying wing, to, rare push propellers, to jet engines, all of these were German inventions, Nazi German inventions. And yet, in spite of that incredible military competence, incredible scientific genius that concentrated in Germany from the 30s to the 40s, Germany lost the war. Why? Because combined with the Russian, American, and British economies, it was never going to be able to win that war. It was just a physical impossibility, no matter how good your troops are. And it doesn't matter. You can say only 3 million Germans died and 20 million Soviets died. Therefore, Germany won the war. Hell no. It was Russian troops, despite 20 million people, that entered Berlin, and Hitler shot himself like a little rat in the sewer. So, industrial might always talks. The question is, how long can we manage what, say, Germany, and see, Germany isn't an accurate representation because Germany was a fully advanced, incredibly advanced industrial power. It was actually industrially ahead of all the other states at that point in time. It's more like the antebellum South. Pre-industrial, mostly agrarian, semi-feudal, up against a fully industrial power. How long can we manage our limited victories? There will be victories, there will be a few victories, but they will be limited, and they will come in the early phases of the war. The longer and longer it prolongs, your chances just keep diminishing, not arithmetically, but geometrically.
No, great point you made. And I think the coalition or the Quad, which India has still not properly evaluated yet, is a great solace for India if it happens. If it doesn't happen, then there is a problem.
It isn't going to happen. It isn't going to happen. You had some idiot at the Ministry of External Affairs say that, our relations with China are good. There's been no deterioration of relations with China. And I'm looking there going, dude, you're meant to be the bloody foreign ministry, and it seems my dogs know more about foreign policy than you sitting in the bloody foreign ministry do. Like, seriously, I mean, he's given this in a reply to Parliament. Relations with China haven't deteriorated. Where does that come from? The Quad, again, see, the Quad is something, we forget the Quad. We still don't have the gumption to call China the aggressor. We don't have the gumption to ban Chinese companies. We don't have the gumption to you accuse China of any damn thing on the international fora. And we want to join the Quad, and we're not very warm on the Quad. You talk to the Quad in private. In public, all governments have to put on a brave face and saying, yeah, we're going to the next level and la-di-da-di-da. In private, I can tell you the Quad, the Australian, Japanese, and American Navy can talk to each other seamlessly. It's almost like they're thinking in one mind because they have the same tactics, same equipment, Aegis-based naval defenses and things like that. India, none of our equipment is compatible with them realistically, except the P3. And even there, we haven't really put in that intercompatibility equipment. So even that, not the P3, the P8 Poseidon.
Poseidon.
The P8, yeah, the P8 Poseidon. We haven't put that in full-on compatibility mode. So, it's essentially, it's like going to war with two different kinds of ammunition. We'll be firing 7.6 ammunition. NATO standard is 5.56, which the Indian Army incidentally has rejected. They don't want 5.56. Even our next generation of ammunition is going to be 7.6 whatever. I forget. I forget the decimal. What comes after the decimal point?
7.62 parabellum.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, that's it. And 7.62 and 5.56, which is the, I know 5.56 is the NATO standard. And it just complicates things, because tomorrow when you run out of ammunition, you are not an industrial power. You will have to import that ammunition on an emergency basis from abroad. And you still don't want to make this compatible. The Quad is a deeply, deeply dysfunctional system. Everybody talks it up because it's sort of aspirational. It's this hope in the West, in Australia, in Japan, that India will sign up. In India, it's more of a show. It's more like, a bankrupt man. Saving face is so important in Indian culture that when your daughter or son is getting married, you may be completely bankrupt, but because you have to show off to your neighbors and to the whole world, you will take loans 50, 60 times your own worth to put on this huge pompous wedding, and so that everybody think, oh my God, what an amazing house, blah, 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 blah. And 1 week later, you'll commit suicide because you couldn't pay back your loans. So this is the kind of crap we're looking at in terms of the Quad. Everybody believes this sort of fake picture that's being generated.
No, I think your analysis is pretty much right on the money, because is that the Chinese have played their cards very well, and India appears to be unprepared and without understanding this Chinese mindset.
Actually, no. The Chinese haven't played their cards. They played their cards very well up to, say, Jiang Zemin and partially up to Hu Jintao. But, for a long time, I thought India's blessing was that Xi Jinping was one of the stupidest people alive. Stupidest and very smart in terms of internal politics, but completely dumb, not dumb, ham-handed, clumsy, arrogant. He forgot all the lessons of Deng Xiaoping. The problem is, it's very good for a smart country when your opponent is dumb. But when you collectively decide to make yourself as dumb or dumber than your opponent, two dumbs never make, unlike the mathematical equation, plus minus thing, or two negatives make a positive, it doesn't work in international relations. Two negatives make a maha negative.
Exactly. No, I think today was a great discussion on all aspects. Coming back to last, actually, the equipments, there has been a lot of praise over the Indians' mountain. It's been the West also, in US also. The analysts have taken very positive note on India's capability to fight in the mountains. But the Chinese attack may most probably come from the sea on Indian ports. And that's where India has to really
look. I disagree with that completely, and I'll tell you why. Their latest destroyer, I think it's the Type 52D, has more vertical launch tubes and therefore more missiles than the entire Indian Eastern Fleet put together. One ship of the Chinese Navy has more than the entire Indian Eastern Fleet put together. Okay, number one. Number two, they are a bit technologically backward, but then the problem is we have non-functional excellent technology. It's our ships are like taking a engine out of a Mercedes, the chassis of a Ferrari, and the wheels out of a Formula One car, and trying to make them all together and hoping that the sum of the parts will be better than the parts themselves. That's not the way it works. Okay, so there is that fundamental problem, number one. Number two, This praise for our mountain troops is a. How many of you have watched Indiana Jones in? I forget. I think it was the Last Crusade where they go to Egypt.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's the Last Crusade, right? Where there's this scene where this Arab guy comes out with two big swords and he's doing this kung fu style. I mean, I don't know, Arab kung fu style, something, something. And Indy just takes out his revolver and bang, one through into the head and shoots him. Indian troops are a bit like that. First of all, what are you even doing up there? This is an area that should be patrolled by drones, where you need to have armed drones just shooting at things the moment they cross over the border. You're not doing that. So, in that sense, even being up there imposes disproportionate costs, wasteful costs on your troops, because the cost of supplying those troops is disproportionate compared to a drone going over there, circling out there 24/7 and hitting people when they try to cross over. Then your troops, supplying your troops through helicopters or whatever, and forcing them to shoot down people coming in. So I'm not, Americans have to say certain things publicly. You don't shame an ally publicly. Okay, you'll always say, it's like, my dog, I can tell you honestly, my dogs are, they run amok when they go out into the park. But when the other aunties come and shout at me saying, what kind of ill-mannered dogs do you have? They're jumping on us and trying to lick our face. I'll be like, you stupid woman, you're just homophobic, you're hateful, la-di-da-di-da. My children are the best children in the whole world, and you just hate dogs and la-di-da-di-da. It's like that. You never talk ill of your own publicly, and you always praise your own publicly. So when anybody else asks me, I'll say, my dogs are the most well-behaved dogs ever. So, it's a bit like that.
Glad. I think you put a point very much across. I think Indian planners need to be aware of PLAN. Less than, because that is the strongest part of their armed forces. And overall, China, we discussed in detail today. And many of you who have liked it, do watch the video on YouTube and comment over there. And we had a lot of audience today. Thank you, Abhijit, for joining. It's late for you. And I'll see you again in next week with some other topic.
Take care. See ya.